Hello and welcome to Logic Pro Bite-Sized VIs. In this video, I'm going to talk about VoiceOver Hotspots. So this is very subjective and you do not need these to use Logic successfully by any means, but I find that they speed up my workflow exponentially. The problem with them is that in the latest version of Sonoma, for example, 14.4 and higher, they don't work as reliably as they once did. I could go weeks in Ventura without having to reset them, but it seems that I have to go daily or every 2 days before I reset these. So your mileage is going to vary. Hopefully this video doesn't age well. Yeah, for the first time you don't want a video to age well because you want it to go back to how it used to be back in the good old days. But let me tell you a bit about hotspots and how I use them and why I think they're useful. For a start, it's very quick when you want to jump to a portion of Logic's window and get to another portion. So for example, I have VoiceOver
120.0000 tempo
to take me straight to the tempo slider. I didn't interact with anything, I didn't use item chooser, I didn't use VoiceOver cursor, I just pressed VO1. Now a hotspot can be set on anything that VoiceOver can see on the screen and sometimes things that it can see off screen as well. It's really cool and very useful. I think so anyway. So today I'm going to show you how you set them, why I've chosen the ones I have, and what I think you might want to do as well. Now bear in mind that there are 10 of these hotspots, and unless you use VoiceOver activities, which I don't, I think that they are global. So if you set them in one application, that's it. So I don't use all 10, so for me there's room to use these in other applications as well, but my primary focus on the Mac is always Logic. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, hotspots set in Logic, and these are the key ones I have. So why don't we start with the tempo? I'm already on it, so get to the tempo however you like, whether that's interacting with the control bar and finding it that way, or using item chooser like by doing VOI.
item chooser menu 193 items.
I can type TEM.
139 2 items. 120.0 1 item. 120.0000 tempo slider.
I typed TEMP, and by the time I hit the P, I was on tempo. So here I can press enter.
120.0000 tempo slider.
And then to set a hotspot, you do VO and shift and a number. Now again, this is one of those places where your mileage will vary because on certain keyboards, and particularly my keyboard, the British keyboard, certain of these key combinations do not work out the gate because they rely solely on the US keyboard and they're tied this way, which I think is very silly, but it is what it is. Now, when I do VO Shift 1, I expect it to tell me that there is no longer a hotspot here because there already was one, and this is how you disable one as well.
Remove hotspot 1.
Yes, so it knew that there was a hotspot 1 here, and now I don't have a tempo hotspot anymore. And if I press VO1 without the shift, it just does that because there's no hotspot there. So if I now do VO Shift 1,
Save as hotspot 1.
it now says saved as hotspot 1. So that's my first. So why did I put that over there? Well, I kind of visualized the Logic screen in a sort of left to right methodology. The control bar, to me, even if it may not physically look this way, but the way VoiceOver sort of sees it, is that it's the first thing I come to after the minimize, maximize, close button, that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I want it to be, I say visually, this is visually in my head, laid out the way that I perceive it. Now, I'm going to break that rule in just a moment, and you're going to see why shortly. But that's the first thing. And because I don't need tempo all the time, and since VoiceOver, by its very nature, is a two-handed operation most of the time, that is a hotspot that I leave exactly where it is on 1. For things that I use all the time, I'm using 0, 9, 8, and 7 hotspots. Hotspot 0
Mixer layout area.
is the mixer layout area, and this requires, by the way, that the mixer is expanded with the X key. If the mixer is not,
Tracks group.
which I've now just pressed X, and I press 0,
Minimize button.
then it jumps to somewhere completely random on the screen. And this is one of the downsides of hotspots. If your screen layout is not exactly as you want it between sessions, you're going to have to be resetting these on a per session basis. And this is why some people don't like them, and I absolutely understand that. These are not for everybody, right? But they're for me. And I hope that somebody from watching this will benefit, but I don't expect all of you to do so. But that's all right. That's what choice is all about. That's why we're here. So I'm going to press X to re-enable the mixer.
Piano channel strip group.
And hopefully my hotspot has not broken as a result of this.
Minimize button.
Ah, it's still broken. Would you look at that? So this gives me an opportunity to show you, jumping to the right place at the right time, how to set it the correct way. And yeah, this is a downside of Sonoma, by the way. This didn't happen in Ventura. If you closed or opened a section of logic, your hotspot would retain itself. But since it doesn't at the moment, as again I say, I hope this video does not age well. I really do. I want this video to age the least well of all my videos ever made, ever. So let me go over to the mixer and set this hotspot.
Full screen untitled control inspector group tracks group mixer group in mixer group mixer layout area.
And here's where I'm going to set VO Shift 0.
Save as hotspot 0.
Okay, my hotspot's back. Now, that is the right hand side of the screen, and it means that I can lay my right hand over the number row along the top edge of the keyboard. I've got my little finger on backspace. I've got my next finger, the ring finger, on the equals, then the dash, then the 0. And I know that not all keyboards have the same layout, by the way, but there are 2 keys to the right of the 0 key in the UK and the US keyboard layout. There we go, I'll say it in the end. So my index finger lands on 0. Now if I move my right hand across, it goes to the 9, so VO9
Tracks header group
goes to track header, VO8
table
goes to the first table in the inspector, we'll talk about that in a bit, and 7
table
goes to the second table in the inspector. So for me, apart from the fact that mixer is not something I do as much as track header, I've put them in an order that I feel most comfortable with. Now, again, you could set these however you like. There's no rules here, none at all. So why have I set them like this? Well, again, it's for me that visual layout of having the mixer on the right hand side, and then track header is kind of further over to the left in its own group, and then the inspector is its own group. So as I said, I was going to break the rule, didn't I? Well, the first table in the inspector, by my reckoning, should be 7, and the second should be 8. But I've done it in order of things I use the most. So having my finger on mixer, when I'm going to interact there and add an audio effect or do things like that, I do that a lot. I occasionally, well, I say occasionally, I more than occasionally go to track header, so that's 9. The first table in the inspector is 8, and I do that a heck of a lot. And yeah. Now that I'm talking about it, I find myself questioning why I set it up like this in the first place. But it's okay. It's been that way for years, and it's going to be hard to change if I change it. So I ain't changing it. So yeah, this is the first table.
Table.
And so some of you might be wondering, well, why do you set it on the table, not in the table? Good question. If you set it in the table, VoiceOver will always go to the item in the table where you set the hotspot. But if, for example, I interact with this table now,
In table, row 1 of 18. Mute. Dimmed
and I go down to say quantize.
Smart Q swing. 50%. 1/16 note. Pop-up button. Has alternative items.
Okay, so I've done that. And now I'll go back to track header with VO9.
Tracks header group.
And if I go back to VO8,
Table. Row 3 of 18. Smart quantize. Pop-up button. Has alternative items.
as soon as I interact with this now, it's going to be exactly where I left it, which is great because it means that it has not moved the cursor. So whenever you come to set up a hotspot, something I've worked out over the years after trial and error is set VoiceOver on the thing you want, not inside the thing you want. Which is exactly why, for example, I didn't set the VoiceOver on track 1 in track header. I set it on track header because if I'm on, say, track 4 or 5 and I double interact once I've jumped to that hotspot, it's going to put me exactly where the cursor should be, not on track 1, which means that I've now lost my place. And the bigger your project, the less likely you are to want to lose your place, let me tell you. I've only got 2 tracks in this project. I've got a piano track and an empty complete control track with nothing on it really. So if I go to track header,
Tracks header group.
and if I double interact,
In track 2 complete group.
I'm on track 2. And if I go back to the first table in the inspector,
Table. Row 3 of 18.
see it's still on number 3. And if I go up 1, even though VoiceOver hasn't spoken that I've moved up, I have pressed the up arrow. And if I now do track header again and double interact,
Tracks header group. In track 1 piano group.
I'm in track 1. This is also true for the mixer. Mixer header,
Mixer layout area. In piano channel strip.
and I'm in track 1. And that's great. And if I go down and then I do the same thing,
Mixer layout area. In piano channel strip group.
of course that didn't work.
Tracks piano.
Let's try that again.
Piano.
You know why? Because, of course, when you interact with the mixer, it puts you on the edit field. That's my bad, not Logic's bad.
Out of tracks. Complete stereo out. Piano channel strip group. Tracks group.
So I've pressed escape, by the way, so that I'm no longer editing the name of the channel strip. Right. Were you going to work now? Because, of course, it's a video. You're going to let me down, aren't you?
Mixer layout. In complete channels.
Yeah, that's better.
Solo.
Let me move off of that. So there we go. That's that one. And the other one, which is the VO7.
Table.
This is the second table in the inspector. Because I use it less than the first, and less than track header, and less than mixer, it's kind of an order of hierarchy. Okay, I think I've worked it out then. It's an order of hierarchy with my right hand. The further I have to move my finger, the less likely I am to use the thing that it's tied to. So I use a mixer a lot. I use track header sometimes. I use the other inspector table, the first one, quite a bit. So yeah.
In table, row 1 of 16.
So there's 16 items in this table. Let's go to the very bottom and then up 2.
None. Or unticked checkbox.
Just for no reason at all. I'll jump back to another hotspot.
Mixer layout area.
And then I'll jump back to that other one.
Table, row 14 of 16. No reset. Unticked.
See? And it's jumped right back to the point. So if I interact, I'm going to be exactly on that thing. So if I was doing, say, quantizing, and I wanted to quantize track 5, but I want to see what the value is. I don't have a track 5, so we just have to pretend I do. I could put the first table in the inspector over quantize, and then I could move out of it, go off and find the track I need to find, come back to that, interact, and I'm already on the quantize. I then don't have to hunt for it. It's brilliant. Of course, you can use item chooser as well, right? And as I say, all of this is very, very subjective. It's how long is a piece of string. You don't have to do any or all or none of this stuff. That's the nice thing about it. But let me show you, for example, why I think hotspots are useful and why item chooser is also useful. I'm going to jump to the tempo bar. And then when I do that, I'm going to stop interacting and go all the way to track header the slow way.
120.0000. Tempo slider.
So I've done that. I'm on the tempo now with the hotspot. And now here's how long it will take me to get back to track header by using interacting, not interacting. This is a very slow process. Here we go.
Out of control bar, inspector, group tracks, group in tracks, group in tracks, time, root tracks, header, group.
Goodness. I could have just hit one hotspot.
Tracks, header, group.
Another one.
120.0.
Another one.
Table, row 3.
Another one.
Table, row 4.
And another one.
Mixer, layout.
So I'm bouncing between all of these things super quickly. Now I have a lot of people come to the studio. I work with a lot of vocalists and I record people here. So I think if you are a Pro Logic user, you have to be as quick as your sighted counterparts. And since they use the mouse and they can just quickly click something, hotspots, for me anyway, are the equivalent of someone who's very proficient with the mouse. Now, of course, I don't like the fact that I have to reset these up often, but when they work incredibly well. And that's why I highly recommend setting up hotspots the way that you want for your own needs. If your needs are not track header, first table, second table in the inspector, mixer, and tempo, that's fine. Maybe you really like the mute and solo button instead of using M&S for whatever reason. Doesn't matter to me. It's all about you. If you like that, find it, pick a number that you're happy with, do VO shift in that number, and hopefully it works. On a British keyboard, again, your mileage is going to vary. So for example, if I want to set VoiceOver 3 as a hotspot, I actually have to press VoiceOver and apostrophe. Because on a US keyboard, that's like doing... Oh, let me check something. Is that right?
Save as hotspot 2.
Okay, so VO shift apostrophe. Yeah, okay, that's like VO2. VO shift apostrophe, so the key to the right of semicolon. Because that's their double quote key in America. But in the UK, at least on my keyboard layout, VoiceOver is a bit broken. So that's the key I have to use for number 2. So if you find that things don't work exactly as planned in your particular keyboard layout, and also if you don't use a standard, what do we call these, like Western keyboards, UK, US keyboards, you're going to have to hunt around for whatever key that you want to set your hotspot with. Numbers are numbers, and that at least is a standard. But the actual shift combinations will vary country to country. For example, in the UK, shift 2 tends to be the double quote, whereas in the US that is the @ sign. And so you will find sometimes that things go a little bit wrong. But if you are okay with that, and when you set up your default Logic template or whatever project you're going to use, if you base as many projects as you can off of your template that you used, your hotspot should work from project to project. If I were to switch out of this project and go to another one, hopefully my my template would work and my hotspots would be functional. It doesn't happen all the time, as I've said. For example, I do some movie editing in Logic. In fact, this very video you're watching now has been edited in Logic, and I can guarantee you that the hotspots I use for the table, the inspector tables, will not be functioning in my video template. Why? Because the inspector tables move when you have a movie imported into Logic. So on track 1, where I've got the video content, it adds another table to the inspector. And so my hotspots for numbers, I have to always look, and even though I do this everyday muscle memory, for numbers 8 and 7 that I've got set, will not function at all until I go back to my default project. So that's something to be aware of. And my hotspots work in the inspector because my, what are those things called? The disclosure triangles. Those are expanded. If they're not expanded, then there's nothing really to have the inspector do. So again, as it's part of my default template and those things are expanded, they work. If those disclosure triangles are collapsed, then they won't work. So hotspots are very, very pernickety, very irritating in some ways, but also time savers in many other ways. That's your lot. I've done a lot of talking. Thanks for listening and watching. Hope you benefit. Let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts on this one. Cheers. Bye for now.